You probably know that as of last week, a court found that many, not all, but many of his tariffs, the ones that he exercised under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or AIPA, I don't know how you pronounce it, um, are illegal. That the Constitution gives to Congress alone, I cannot emphasize that enough, the power to put tariffs on products coming in from other countries. And the administration took that power under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977, off the top of my head. I could be wrong on that, saying that he has the power to declare an economic emergency and then do whatever he wants. And that was always been a stretch. And court said, no, you actually can't do that. And that's raising all kinds of real problems for the economy and for Trump and for the future. But Trump is now insisting that if he can't put those tariffs in place, that America is going to become a third world country. Mind you, those tariffs were not in place before April 2nd, and really not even they were vague for a while there. So the idea that as of, well, let's just go back to January, the idea that as of December last year, America was a third world country, our economy was booming. The wages were going up, things were great. So he's got this fantasy, and he's trying to sell people on this fantasy that if he doesn't get the power to overrule the Constitution, we're going to be a third world country. And I'm just not entirely sure how well that will sell, how aware people are that the economy is slowing and inflation is rising because of his policies, including the tariff. So you're seeing there both the courts saying, you can't do that, and him saying, I have to, or America's done. And the court gave him time to appeal that. So we'll see where that goes when it goes to the Supreme Court. But that has stopped him. He was also stopped this morning with by a judge in California who ruled that his use of the Marines and the Federalized National Guard in and around Los Angeles was illegal. That he violated the Posse Comitatus Act. And weirdly, that there's a different case about the actual deployment, but this is the use of them. And I feel like I should really actually write about the Posse Comitatus Act and what it is, because nobody seems to understand where we got it. It's actually important for where we are today. And I've talked about it so many times on these podcasts or webcasts. I'm not going to do it now. You can find it in the clips that my lovely person cuts. But the judge said, no, you can't federalize the National Guard and send in Marines to do law enforcement, which is what the Posse Comitatus Act said. It said the U.S. Army at the time cannot be used domestically to act as law enforcement. And over the years since the passage of that act in 1878, the other branches of the service, with the exception of those law enforcement officers who fall under the Department of Homeland Security, they don't consider themselves covered by the Posse Comitatus Act. All the other branches of the service do. I think that's really important, by the way. But he's been stopped there as well. So you're seeing increasing threats from Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem to send in ICE, which is in the Department of Homeland Security, to cities like Chicago and Detroit and elsewhere. The Trump administration has now been enjoined, that is, stopped from using the military or federalizing the National Guard. Once again, the judge gave Trump time to challenge that and to take that to a higher court. So he's getting stopped in these places, but there are other ways in which people are pushing back. So the Democratic governors of the different states, and occasionally they work with a Republican, are banding together to take a stand against the Trump administration in a number of different places, either legally or putting political pressure on the administration over things like the cancellation of hundreds of millions of dollars of funding for alternative energy or clean energy projects, some of which, there's one of which off the coast of Rhode Island and Connecticut that is 80% done, and Trump just pulled the plug on it. It would have powered, or it will power if it gets finished, 350,000 homes in those states. And a number of different governors, I forget how many there are now, it's at least 5, are banding together to sue and to insist on getting this money back. Similarly, you see, obviously, Gavin Newsom, who is out there pushing against the Trump administration, but also J.B. Pritzker in Illinois and elsewhere. Those 2 states are ones where Trump has done the most threatening. And that's significant, I suspect, in part because it seems pretty clear as an observer that both Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker are good candidates for the Democrats to run in 2028. I'm not making a prediction there. People come out of nowhere. If you had told me that we would have such a dynamic candidate running for the Senate in Maine 3 weeks ago, I would have been like, show me the money. And there we have this man running. The same can happen, of course, at the national level. It is far too early for anybody to start predicting who is going to be a presidential candidate. But we know Trump worries about these things because we watched him try to convince Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky to smear Joe Biden in 2019, in July of 2019, because he suspected Biden would be his biggest competition in 2020. So the fact that he is going after Pritzker and Newsom suggests he sees them as real threats, but they're pushing back, and they're pushing back very, very effectively. Newsom, both by using the power of California's economy and also his use of social media. J.B. Pritzker standing very firm on the law and on the Constitution. And because he is himself a billionaire, making threats about protecting the long-term constitutional prosecutions of people who break the law really has teeth in it. And those sorts of things, watching people band together, I think is really quite strong. But you're also seeing it with the American people. You're seeing pushback all over the place. And I don't just mean the protests, although the protests are very important. Those, the protests we see in the streets, on the bridges, on the overpasses, those are really important. That is a great way to get messages out. So those are important, but you're also seeing things like the spontaneous artwork popping up about the sandwich thrower in Washington, D.C., a young man named Sean Dunn who threw a submarine sandwich at an officer from Customs and Border Patrol, and the government tried to get him with felony assault, which carries what they charge him with could have had him behind bars for 8 years. And the other way people are pushing back is a grand jury refused to indict him for that. They refused to go along with that. And they have, at this point, grand juries in the Washington area have refused to indict at least 6 people for pushing back against the takeover of Washington, D.C. So you're seeing the ordinary American people stepping up to defend the rule of law. And you're also seeing people using songs and using artwork and showing up to defend their neighbors and sending out alerts when ICE is in the area and putting up posters explaining to people their rights and going online and explaining how things work. There's increasingly this sort of feel of momentum, I think, on people trying to stop the Trump administration. And as a result of that, I think the administration is pushing as hard as it possibly can to threaten, to insist that they're in charge, to claim that they can do things that the courts are saying that they can't. And that's going to be a really hard sell for these reasons. See why I had a hard time writing tonight's letter? Trump's not in good shape. They're doing all this at a time when their figurehead is um, is falling apart, and that's a, a problem for a number of reasons for them. First of all, because they have to be concerned about it, and we as a country should be concerned about it because that person is running a large, powerful country and seems not to be in great shape, and that means that he and we are very vulnerable to other countries deciding that they would like to take some slack up. And you saw that this weekend, for example, with Russian operatives jamming the GPS of a plane carrying European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and that's a really big deal. I mean, she's pretty much the leader of Europe, of the EU, and here they were threatening the safety of her plane. The pilots had to land using paper maps. That's the sort of thing that you can see people testing what they can get away with. And of course, that's also a way for Putin to thumb his nose at Trump and be like, yeah, you keep saying you're going to do something to me. Obviously, you're not. And that is an issue. Hang on to that idea. One of the other big things that is a problem for the administration is the Epstein files, which they're madly trying to chum the waters to make sure those hide. But Congress went back into session today. Remember, it was out of session for August. And immediately, people have introduced a discharge petition to force House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican of Louisiana, to release the Epstein files. I don't know how many signatures it has now. It needs to have a certain number of signatures, and I don't know if it's gotten them yet. But tomorrow, I believe it's at least 10 of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell's victims will speak in front. I believe it's in front of the Capitol building. I could be wrong about that, but their voices are going to be heard. That issue is not going to go away. And the reason that matters for the administration is, aside from anything else, even I was going to say, even if he's not in the files, but we know he is in the files. Aside from anything illegal or anything else, one of the things that nailed together the MAGA coalition in 2024 were the number of people who thought that the Biden administration was hiding the Epstein files and that Trump would release them. And the longer it takes for them to release them and the more they throw crap at the walls pretending they have done something, those people aren't stupid. The more they look at it and say, wait a minute, why aren't you releasing the files? That's why we were on this train. And it's already dramatically splitting the MAGA movement. And, the American people, I believe the number is 80% of Americans think that that the administration is not handling the Epstein files well. So there's the Epstein files hanging out there. There is the economy hanging out there as the tariffs start to bite, inflation starts to rise. And the economy continues to slow down and unemployment ticks up. There is also the crisis in the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and for people's health care, because of the budget reconciliation bill that the Republicans are trying to call the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the OBBBA. If you've seen that acronym, that's what it means. But in that budget reconciliation package, the Republicans thought that their cuts that they had made to Medicaid wouldn't hit until after the midterms. But when they cut the tax credits that people who make between 100 and 400% of the federal poverty level got to buy their health insurance, what that meant was, first of all, that's going to kick a lot of people off their ability to buy health insurance in the markets. But it also means that the healthier people in those markets will decide not to have health care. And when they leave because they're healthier, the ACA markets are going to get more expensive across the board. So you're already seeing people like Arkansas Senator Sarah Huckabee Sanders saying, you can't raise prices, to the health insurers to the amount you want. That's just not right. Well, they're doing it because now they're in trouble to cover the amount that is not being covered by those healthier people who formerly would have been in the markets. So they have that hanging out there, but they also have the crisis of Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services, who has been slashing his way through personnel, through funding, cut funding for cancer research, now is attacking vaccines. And, the reason that he was ever invited into MAGA to begin with was because Trump was nailing together this coalition, and there was the hope that he would bring people into that MAGA coalition, and he did. But now people are having to live with the fact he's part of that coalition, and a lot of people did not expect their health care to disappear and their vaccines to disappear, their ability to get COVID vaccine, for example, or cancer research. People like cancer research, and those of us who are older see just how much the treatment for cancer has changed in our lifetimes and are aghast at the idea that we're cutting that research. So that's also something that is important enough to people that over the weekend, 9 former directors of the CDC from all administrations back to Jimmy Carter, Republicans and Democrats both said, this is not okay. You're destroying public health. So the administration is having to deal with all of these things at the same time. And what they're doing is they're going on offense to try and make people frightened and make people react to what they are doing rather than people taking the ball and deciding what we want going forward.